automate your SOC? Caleb?
Good advice is automate your triage. Can you hear me?
Yes, okay. Go ahead. Yeah, automate your triage. So, meaning quickly, can you guys hear me? Am I not audible? Hold it. You can't hear
Oh, I can
me.
hear you now. Yeah.
All right, hold it.
Yes. Yes.
Let's start over for the beginning. I don't know what happened there. All right, Caleb, let's start again. Caleb, do me a favor. Give me some good advice on automating your SOC.
To automate your triage.
Okay, I like it. Edward, give me some bad advice on automating your SOC.
Uh, Getting a threat intelligence feed and simply dropping every single alert that doesn't match anything malicious in the threat intelligence feed.
Yeah, just drop it all in there. That's some bad advice. But Caleb, I'm coming back to you. Give me some worse advice on automating your SOC.
Push all your alerts out to your customers, your employees, and let them deal with it.
I like it.
Get
That
ready.
definitely
It's
one up.
Super Cyber Friday.
Hey, welcome everybody to Super Cyber Friday. My name is David Spark, and thankfully you all can hear me, and you can hear my guests as well. Today's topic is hacking SOC automation, an hour of critical thinking about how the line of what we can automate is actually changing. And, well, we want to know what it is today, what it will be tomorrow. Our two guests, who you just met, is Caleb Sema, who's builder over at White Rabbit, and Edward Wu, who is the CEO and founder of DropZone AI. And what do you know? DropZone AI is our spectacular sponsor for today's event. Thank you so much, DropZone, for sponsoring. All right, lots of ways to participate, and you know how to do it. There's the chat room. You've all discovered that already, which is pretty clear. Also, you can submit how not to automate your SOC. That's our bad idea. And also, is there a lag? You say there's a big lag. There is a delay, but I can hear you. Should I refresh, guys? Maybe I should refresh. How to improve your SOC automation. Join us on video with Bring Me On. Ask a question. Guess. Also, we're going to have a Super Cyber meetup afterwards. Vote for your favorite question. It's fine now. It's fine now. All right. So that's why we were having problems. We were having lag issues earlier. All right. Today's schedule, you saw it. We're going to have our good ideas, bad ideas. We'll play the public interest department. Yes. We will do our meetup at the end. If you have not joined our meetup before, we want you to be there. And it's on Discord now. That's a platform we're using. So if you don't have a Discord account, get one before the end of this event. And we will ask you for questions you want to ask the community by just labeling it Meetup colon. You can do that at any time during this event, but we'll remind you again towards the end of the event, and then we'll have our meetup, which will be, again, on Discord. All right. I do want to mention that join us for our next event. We're not going to have a show next Friday, but the following Friday we will. And attacking CISOs. It's going to be very different. It's an hour of critical thinking about your questions for our CISOs. So it's essentially an AMA for CISOs. We'll have two CISOs on, and you can ask them any question you would like. All right. Enough of that nonsense. Let's get to the topic at hand, and that is automating the SOC. All right, I have a question for you. Well, heck, either of you for that matter. I want to talk about the history of automation because that term has a very wide sort of breadth of what we mean by automation, not automation. So let's not spend too much time on it. Edward, what have we historically looked at when we've talked about automation?
Yeah, I would say historically, the primary paradigm for automation is rule-based automation. So this is where you write detailed playbooks, ifs and else statements to specify exactly the sequence of steps the automation should take.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, that sounds good. Anything to add to that, Caleb?
I was going to go more generic and just say it's basically becoming as lazy as possible. So anything that is manual that you do multiple times, you should just not do it again. So write something to automate it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and well, that's how we've seen it. All right. Definitely AI has changed this paradigm. And I'm going to say within the last 2 years? Because the prior 2 years we had, quote, AI, but it wasn't behaving the way we're seeing it today. So and I'll start with you, Caleb, what is it I'm going to use the word comfortable automating in the SOC?
I think we're still trying to figure that out from an AI perspective, right?
Mhm.
Which is AI is very new for everybody, and everyone is trying to figure out where does it fit, and to be more particular, what is AI actually good at? So I think right now what you're seeing is a lot of people dipping their toes in the AI world by doing the really simple things. And these are, hey, in the SOC, you used to have to write really complex queries in a query language in order to retrieve the results. So, hey, you know what AI is good at? I can take natural language. It will automate and translate that to this complicated query, or even the opposite, which is, oh man, I just joined a SOC team. This query is super complicated. What does it mean? You can translate it backwards in English and say, oh, this is what it's trying to do. So I think, that's a good example of sort of the simplistic things at which AI is trying to go into. And there's also other things, which is like, hey, there's a lot of like detailed excerpts of different things. An IP address is coming from here. A little data segment is coming from there. Something from the report or alert words come from here. How do you kind of throw those things together and then come up with a nice little summary or description of exactly what's going on? And so, AI that you're starting to see in the SOC, these are the kinds of places, creation of reports, rewriting and summary, rules, sort of descriptions and translation. That's where you're starting to see a lot of this happen right now.
All right, Edward, what do you add to that?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, in general, especially if we zoom into the Gen AI with technologies, I would say in general, it's good at two things. One, it's good at summarization. So you can have, blogs of specific CVEs or exploits that you can simply, copy paste into a variety of different AI tools, and they can compress the information into a couple sentences or a paragraph or two for you. So that's kind of one example. The other thing is generation. So whether it's generating, KQL queries or SPL queries, whether it's, generating specific scripts that potentially help you to perform certain tasks. I would say these two are kind of the big areas where AI is a lot more capable than the traditional rule-based or playbook-based automation.
All right. And by the way, I'm just going to call out to the audience. Guys, you can do a lot better with the bad ideas. I mean, I'm telling you, it's bad ideas on automating the SOC. There's a lot of things you can do wrong here. And I think it's just it's easy.
I've got to
First of all, speaking of that, forget about bad idea. Either of you, I'm interested to know, what have you screwed up in the SOC in the past? What have you done like head, palm to head kind of a thing? Anything or seen, maybe not yourself, or seen screwed up in the SOC. Either one of you, jump in.
I'll let Edward go, and I'll follow.
Edward,
Cool.
what's the biggest mistake you've seen?
Yeah, I would say probably one of the biggest mistakes I've seen is teams often way underestimate the trade-offs that they are making when they tune detections. So because I previously worked at a detection vendor for many years, so had a lot of experience generating detections. And I think I've seen a lot of cases where folks will turn off detections entirely because they perceive a specific detection as having too low of a signal to noise ratio. However, a lot of these behavioral detections are also the very late stage detections, abnormal reads, kind of PS exact, remote admin access detections. So I would say kind of not paying attention to the sacrifice or the cost when you're turning off detections is one of the biggest mistakes I've seen.
I like that.
So mine is a little bit more operational driven, where we have seen definitely multiple times. I'm going to say this multiple. This has happened multiple times where people have created detections, made them as critical, had them connect to our incident response PagerDuty system, and then they didn't test them, pushed them out, and it started rising everybody up as criticals and paging everybody across the company. I have seen this happen multiple incidents of where people are writing bad detections, not testing them, and then having them automatically connected and not realizing it and waking everybody up. So that's definitely one of the and the thing is about you see it happen not just once in every company, you see it happen multiple times in every company, which is the more entertaining part of this.
Well, this is, I guess, that goes down to the classic fear of, I have to, quote, tune my system so it works for my environment. And you don't realize that you got to kind of get it at a good stage of right at the beginning, because if you don't, you get the situation you just described, Caleb. I mean, I'm assuming you're nodding your head, Edward. Yes?
Yeah, I think it is a delicate fine balance, right? If the detection is too noisy, it floods the system and drown out the actual signals. But if you turn off the detection entirely, to some extent, you lose visibility. So it is a delicate balance.
But I'm assuming you could do things in stages. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Caleb. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got the biggest problem here is that there is direct connect between a certain status of detection going directly into raising an alarm in your incident response system. With no human in the loop in this process, right? And so the biggest, I think, thing that needs to be separated is, no matter what you think that alert is or how critical it is or how valid you think it is, there needs to be a human in the loop. And that human in the loop needs to be able to say, hey, this is what it is. We need to go verify and validate this before raising this level of status in an alarm. So it actually becomes a bit more of a process problem, I think, than somewhat of a technical problem. Like, you can have a phenomenal detection system that really does, whoa, hey, this needs to be red alarm because it clearly sees an attacker, but that still shouldn't be automatically connected to an incident response at which these things start flagging. So there needs to be a little bit of a management process problem before it goes to people who aren't part of the security team. Is a great example.
By the way, this issue of process comes up again and again, Caleb, with everything in security. And I got to assume that SOC is probably at the king of the mountain of dealing with process issues, for that matter. I do want to remind people that you can ask a question, which we do not have any questions right now. If you look at the little icons on the right, the second one down, it has a little speech bubble with a question mark in it. Click on that and ask Caleb and Edward any question you may have about automating the SOC. If you have other questions, type meetup : and we'll leave that for our after show time as well. But please go ahead and ask questions. Oh, and we see we're starting to get 10% better tips. All right. Oh, this is interesting. From Permiso, Randall, 10% better. Measure the holistic impact of AI on SOC on an ongoing basis to understand where value is added most / least. This is an interesting thing. All right. I want to address this, Edward. What Permiso just said. And saying hello to you, Caleb. This idea of, it goes back to the fine tuning, but before we were messing around with AI, we were dealing with fine tuning. How is the AI fine tuning story different?
Yeah, it is a little bit different. I would say ultimately AI is an automation tool. So what that boils down to is, regardless what form or shape the product actually takes, in general, most AI products go for SOC automation is to augment the team with more analytical bandwidth and capabilities, right? Allowing the team to operate as if you have, double or triple the number of human analysts. So this is where what we have seen in the field is, with this additional increase in the capacity of the team, in general, that means the team can unwind a lot of the historical fine-tuning, because historically, in order to reduce the volume of detections down to a level that's survivable for the team, a lot of rules had been applied and created. But now with the additional capacity, you actually don't need to tune out semi detections anymore, because hopefully, with the promises and the capabilities of AI, the team will have a lot more capacity to maybe look at 2 times or 3 times the alerts.
I like this question. Go ahead, Caleb.
I was just going to say, going to sort of what Edward was saying, and maybe more towards what Permiso is, his question about measure, right? Which is, okay, what effectively is the difference that AI makes in your SOC? So this really relies a lot on, well, how are you measuring your SOC? So to go back to Edward's thing, if you say, okay, one of our measurements that we're doing is time to triage, right? And what does time to triage means? That means by the time an alert is fired, do I either disregard this alert? Do I mark it as false positive? Do I say, oh, this is a really something? And then what does that look like per alert? First of all, the big question is, do you even measure that in your SOC? And if you do, then you can easily measure the impact of AI, because a lot of what sort of Edward and others are moving towards is taking that triage, automatically automating with AI the enrichment processes or the investigative processes that generally an analyst would have to do per alert, which means your time to triage should significantly be reduced. And if you're measuring time to triage, then you will see that impact quite rapidly. But there's lots of different ways of doing that. For example, if you measure things such as how effective your detections are, or how often do you create your detections, or number of detections per month. Does AI help there or does it not? And so all of those things, it just matters how you measure. And that's really the ultimate question.
I want to remind everybody to click the link at the bottom of the screen to join us for our next Super Cyber Friday, which will be in 2 weeks, which is pretty much a CISO AMA, Ask a CISO Anything. That if you click on the link, it will not take you out of this chat. It'll open up another window, so you can still very much be in this chat and just register for the one in 2 weeks. Please join us for that. And you can enter questions into that one for our AMA as well. But we have our first game. Let's hear it.
Do you know what others are thinking? On the public interest.
All right, the audience plays along with this one as well, and I always like to point out that this is a very simple game that's very hard to conquer. There are going to be 4 questions here. Getting 4 for 4 is, I think we've only had 1 or 2 winners in all the years we've been doing this. Were you one of them, Caleb?
I was one of them. Yeah,
you were one of them. All right, let's see if you can go 2 for 2 here.
I gotta see if I can do 2 for 2. Yeah.
All right. Most average monthly search queries: automation, orchestration, or remediation. Oh, this is a good one. And I have not seen this. I'm going to play along too because Rich produced this. Edward, what do you think?
It got to be automation.
Yeah, I'm going to go with automation too. What do you think, Caleb?
I'm the same. Yeah.
Automation. All right. Everyone's thinking automation. We are all wrong.
No!
Well, I guess you're not going 2 for 2, Caleb.
I guess not. I'm 2 for 2.
All right. Yeah. Wow. That's remediation.
How is remediation? No, like that.
Here's the thing. Obviously, I also
this
have
feels
to stress,
wrong to me.
But also, this is not just cybersecurity people typing this in. These could be other reasons people are typing in remediation, and it could be a host of different things. God knows what.
Yeah, but still, like even then, you'd think automation would be way more. Remediation is a very technical term, versus I feel like automation is way more generic as a thing.
But that we found out is people do make more specific requests than they do make requests of very generic words. Like that, we have discovered that you can fall into that trap often here in this
Interesting.
game. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Second one. Let's see if you get 3 right. Agents or bots? You see, now agents is a more common word than I think bots.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm gonna say bots.
I'm gonna pick agents. Bots.
I'm gonna go agents
because it's shorter.
Yeah. Let's see what we got. Bots wins.
Yeah.
All right. I'm out. All right. Here we go. Next one. NLP OCR. What does NLP stand for?
Natural language
Natural language
processing.
Natural language. Thank you. Natural
Yeah.
language processing. All right, this is a good one.
I'm going to say OCR.
I would have said OCR 5 years ago. I don't think I'm going to say OCR today, though.
Yeah, because of AI.
Yeah, I'm going to say NLP. I'll say NLP.
Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah.
You might be right.
I'm going to pick NLP as well because I think NLP has a lot more academic conferences.
Yeah.
And I think those folks are generally pretty good at SEO.
Are you sticking with OCR or are you jumping to NLP? What are you doing, Caleb?
I'm just going to stick with OCR just to be sort of the anti. So
all right, let's see what happens. Ah, you win.
Oh, wow.
Not bad. All right. Well, OCR is still holding on strong. All right, here's the last one. Integration, process, trigger, workflow.
Ooh.
It's tough.
I'm going to pick process.
I'm going workflow.
Man. I'm going to go integration.
All right. No one's picking trigger. We'll see. Did anyone pick trigger? A few people picked trigger. Let's see. Way to go, Edward.
Process.
Very good. I think you got 3
There
out of
you
4,
go.
yes?
Mostly.
Oh, no, you got 2 out of 4.
2 out of 4.
As did you, Caleb. 2 out of 4 for both of you. Did anyone get 4 out of 4? That I'd like to know. How did everyone do? All right. Let's get. We got lots of questions, so come in. Oh, but before we do that, so we've been talking about automation. DropZone AI, Edward's company, is our wonderful sponsor for this event. Thank you so much. Because we've been dancing around all the different ways. I want to know what DropZone AI is doing in SOC automation. Can you explain it for us, Edward?
Yeah, so at DropZone, we are leveraging latest Gen AI advancements to build essentially AI tier 1 security analysts that make SOC's teams day-to-day easier by automating the tier 1 alert investigations, including enrichment, pivoting across different security tools, and ultimately working side by side with your team to reduce your time to disposition. It takes out the repetitive tasks of the initial triage and investigation, so your team can focus on only the real threats as well as critical projects that truly require human-level intelligence.
So this is great, but I'm going to throw this just as a choice because Werner asked a question just before we played the game that I wanted to throw in. That the bottom line is we don't want to be doing these mundane tasks even in the lowest level people. But Werner asks, do you think automating level 1 SOC tasks, which is what you're doing, leads to you having an engineering gap, as in no tier 1 SOC engineers, especially when trying to bring new people into SOC? I liken this to not teaching kids long division because they can divide on their calculator, kind of a thing. Obviously, there's got to be some training. Like, you're going to still teach them how to do tier 1 alerts, but nobody wants to do long division manually, do they, Edward? Yes?
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy. In my mind, I think first and foremost, this is a very valid concern. Like, is AI going to cut off, the ladder, pull up the ladder behind, in terms of the talent pipeline? In my perspective, I think there are a couple of things that's actually in our favor. First, a lot of other professions has actually demonstrated that when you increase the level of automation, you don't really cut off the talent pipeline. Like, one example is airline pilots. Like, as most of us know, airlines are incredibly automated. There's autopilot, auto landing, auto takeoff. But still, we have a healthy supply of airline pilots at this moment. So I think other industries, first and foremost, have figured things out, and that we can learn from.
That's a good analogy.
The other part I would say is actually training. Like, training an AI security analyst, a human security analyst takes time, and obviously there's different, courses, boot camps, but AI analysts oftentimes, as we have observed, can actually be a tremendous training tool, because as the system is investigating different alerts, it's kind of like you have a study buddy who's working on the same set of problems, and you can contrast and compare your analysis with your buddy. And we have seen a lot of cases where like using AI automation as a training wheel or a coach essentially can actually speed up a lot of the learnings of new analysts.
Very, very good point. All right. At this point, I want to let everyone know that we're going to put a poll up. If you are interested in connecting specifically with Edward over at Dropzone AI to learn more specifically about this SOC automation in sort of automating all, specifically these tier 1 tasks, we put a poll up. If you look on the right-hand side, the icons, the third one down has a little bar chart. That's a poll. Go ahead, respond to the poll, and we will make that warm introduction to Edward. So go ahead. Please click on that poll right now. All right. Tier 1 automation. I'll ask you, Caleb, how comfortable are you with dealing with the automation of tier 1 stuff? And can we get into the specifics, what we're referring to when we say tier 1?
Yeah, I think, tier 1 is sort of an alert comes in, and what are the ways at which you can at least get to a stage at where you can dismiss this alert and or require more investigation because it's probably something more interesting. So that's what I would probably, at a very generic way, base tier 1 off of. But Edward, you're an expert. Would you agree with that, or am I missing something off of that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like we think of it as tier 1 is where the investigation and the triage that you need to perform in order to reach a point where you can make a disposition, right? Is this a false positive or glaringly obvious false positives I can, can close out and move on? Or is there's actually something here? Maybe a few investigative threads has turned back to show some, kind of concerning behaviors that we should escalate and, escalate to tier 2 and tier 3 to take a closer look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what that's my definition of sort of tier 1 work and the thing at which you automate. And to me, automation is obviously, I told you my definition, which is anything at which I'm manually having to do to spend human time in order to accomplish this task is the automated part to get me to the point of saying, dismiss this or say, yes, this is the right thing. So, I think in a SOC, that's a lot of different work, right? And the thing that's difficult about a SOC is these alerts are various and different. So if you get an alert that's a network event versus an application level event versus a system event, these require different sets of enrichment and investigation sometimes in order to come to that position to say, dismiss this, or this requires to up-level this up to the next tier. So most companies today, they want to automate that thing. And the way they do that is by playbooks. So you pick a playbook, you say, okay, I'm going to automate this thing. I always take an IP address and I always go and say, is this a bad IP address or a good IP address? And then you don't want to manually look that up. You write a script to enrich that. So every time you see an IP address, it'll tell you, is it bad or good? That's a great example of just simple automation that every SOC team generally has to do at some point or another.
I want to address this question from William Taluba here. What are the best practices for ensuring the accuracy and reliability of automated SOC processes? And you were actually alluding to this earlier, Edward, saying it's kind of good to have tier 1 people checking your work, having a study buddy kind of a thing. And actually, I'm doing an episode of Defense in Depth, recording it later today, about this variation and specifically about integrity too. So, I'm assuming this is core to your work at Dropzone AI is improving the accuracy and reliability. I'll just blatantly ask you, what are you doing to improve that?
Yeah, that's definitely a really good question. I would say in general, if the automation is supported by traditional rules and playbooks, then it's 100% deterministic, right? You know exactly what the automation is doing. So the accuracy and reliability ultimately boils down to what you have hard-coded or what steps you have hard-coded. This obviously for anything that's AI or Gen AI based, it's a lot more nuanced because as we know, any AI or Gen AI solution ultimately is there's an element of non-determinism, right? These technologies do not always answer the exact same thing if you prompt it, and this is where I would say a couple things. One is like obviously there are a lot of vendors out there or maybe visionaries claiming that, hey, we can reach autonomous SOC where we can have AI do the whole thing end to end and we don't need any humans. And I would say actually one of the biggest reason I personally don't think we are there yet is because the accuracy and reliability is not at a level where we can have software running the entire SOC, which is actually one of the reasons at DropZone we are really focused on tier 1 work, understanding that there will be tier 2 and tier 3 human analysts reviewing, making the final decision, incorporating additional context, oftentimes only live in people's heads. So I think that's kind of one is keeping human in the loop, I would say is one of the biggest thing that to keep in mind. And I would say another thing is when you are testing the product or testing your automation, ensure that you actually spend the time to collect the metrics so that okay, I'm either I built this automation, I brought in a vendor, exactly what is the accuracy looks like in my environment for my alerts, because oftentimes it's kind of easy for vendors to make wild claims. Hey, we are like 99.99% accurate, but that might not mean anything for your specific environment and alerts.
I'm going to throw this question from Permiso, which I was pronouncing correctly before, but since you're friends with him, Caleb, you probably are pronouncing it correctly. And Permiso asks, where does AI fit with the shared responsibility model? Will it cause greater fuzziness? I don't think we've had discussions about the shared responsibility with AI. There's a lot of, we accept what you get. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, or, and I know that you did a lot of research in the space. Did this come up at all in your own research, Caleb?
Well, so I think there needs to be a little bit more inquisitive as what does that mean, right? Because let's take the word AI. AI, it can be, are we talking about shared responsibility with foundational frontier models like Anthropic or OpenAI? Or are we talking about shared responsibility with models in general? Or are we talking about or just, SaaS offerings that have AI in it? Or, I think this is a very difficult question to answer when I think shared responsibility.
Well,
I think I can answer it.
I think there's two levels.
Frontier models.
Let me say there's two levels. There's a shared responsibility of how the model's being developed and a shared responsibility of the output. Like, do I accept everything that comes out of this model as factual? Like, we're producing all this, but you can't hold us to any material that we create that is actually correct. But at the same time, there's a shared responsibility on the front end of what you're doing. Like, there's a front and back end concern to this. Isn't there, Caleb, here?
I mean, I think, yes, in the creation of the model that is being used for distribution, there may or may not be some shared responsibility. So, for example, if you are an enterprise and you want to trust a model and you are saying the shared responsibility is on the model creator to make it well behaved and for it to have a certain set of ethics based on what we believe an enterprise user would be, then yes, I do believe that is sort of responsibility of the model creator to ensure that it does have that. However, any model creator knows that this is a very difficult task in and of itself. Is when you create I'll call AI quote unquote 13-year-old human, yes, you can have some control over them, but ultimately you push it hard enough, you manipulate it hard enough, and you'll who knows what you'll get out of it. And so I do think it's also responsibility of the user of that model to test that model to ensure that that you have validation that it's got the right behavior, the right ethics, and it operates at the level of what you expect. I also think it is on your responsibility as the user of that model to ensure that you put sort of guardrails around that model to say, well, if it outputs things that I don't like I want to make sure I have some sort of filter. So, of course, if you talk about OpenAI, Anthropic, and other providers of models, then that shared responsibility, I think, starts to shift, because I trust that OpenAI and Anthropic and Amazon and Microsoft will provide these kinds of responsibilities. They should be very good at the trust and safety. They should be very good at making sure that model behaves the way at which it claims that it does. So, I do think there is a shift of that model, whether I'm hosting into the model myself and the model creator versus these frontier guys who are providers of that model.
All right. Edward, you seemed at the beginning you wanted to jump in on this. What do you want to add?
Yeah, I think maybe two quick things. One is we have seen cases like frontier model providers, because one concern with a lot of the models in terms of responsibility is like intellectual property, right? What happens if an open source model was trained using Reddit data, and then I, as an application developer, start to use open source models? The next thing I know, my chatbot starts to coughing up, data that, to some extent might be copyrighted or belong to somebody else's intellectual property. So on that front, I would say we have seen a couple commercial frontier vendors or model providers start to offer protective clauses. Like, hey, if you use our model and if you get sued for intellectual property or copyright infringement, we will protect you, right? So that's kind of one thing we have seen. And then in terms of, the like building applications, because I think cybersecurity is a very interesting field, but if we were to zoom out, we already start to see like AI-based agents, assistants start to pop up essentially in every single white-collar industry. And one thing I have seen that started recently, I'm actually pretty interested, is a lot of these AI assistants or AI agent vendors are offering some sort of insurance. So it's kind of like when you are a doctor, you get some sort of malpractice insurance. And I've actually seen a couple insurance companies offering AI agent malpractice insurance. So really? I think that's that's actually pretty interesting. That I could see down the road, maybe that's one way the responsibility as well as the blame could be absorbed.
Well, yeah, because I mean, there's a certain, like we talk about this just for cybersecurity insurance in general, is you reduce the risk as much as you can or as much as economically makes sense, and then you get insurance for what you can't manage or what you can't predict, if you will. And that, I mean, it seems that AI is going to have that. Here's an interesting thing that Mike Hartner is challenging you here, Edward, and I'd love it if you respond to this. Other reasons I think the SOC can't be fully automated on tier one include how up to date the AI is and zero-day attacks. How do you take that challenge, Edward?
Yeah, I could argue it both ways.
Okay.
But maybe one contrarian point I can provide to Mike is, to some extent, one thing I mentioned earlier is Gen AI in general is very good at reading. So I would say in terms of like reading news and keeping updates, up to date on like, new CVEs showing up, new exploits, public exploits showing up, I don't think any human on the planet can read as quickly as AI at this point. We actually have seen a couple threat intelligence vendors using Gen AI to essentially, monitor Twitter feeds and look at new GitHub projects being put up that contain public like exploits. So I would say maybe that's one contrarian point.
Well, so you're arguing I think your argument is making sense. Like, what's the better solution here? Like, there isn't a better solution. Is there, Caleb?
I would just like to go with Everett's, to what the point is hey, it's AI can't keep up to date with news, and I think what Everett is saying is actually what you're finding is not only can it, but actually it's probably the only thing that can, right. Especially
you're
in
echoing
this
my
world.
Point. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But the number two thing I'd probably like to also add in is zero-day exploits. In a SOC, actually, it's the job of a SOC isn't to detect an O-day exploit. The job of a SOC is to detect the behavior of the attacker after the exploit. You'd love to be able to detect them in the act of the exploit, but let's be blunt, like that's very, very minor. what we all have to understand is, hey, you assume O days exist, but the attacker still has to do things. And so that's generally where the SOC relies, is what's the lateral movement? What kinds of activities are going to happen due to that exploit? What is the attacker's behavior through that process is where the SOC mostly focuses versus necessarily the O-Day act itself.
All right. We have a call came in.
Oh, there's calls?
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
It's the Department of Yes game is what we're playing. As I have to remind you that these are bad ideas. These are not what we would actually recommend. But being that the two of you work for the Department of Yes, no matter how crappy these are, your answer is yes. And you're going to explain why you're going to deploy them. Without being facetious, this first one comes from Andrew Aiken. I'll have you start first, Caleb. Implement an automation that sends all security alerts directly to the company's main social media accounts. Let's get ahead of the notion. I like this. Let's get ahead of the notification requirements. Yeah, that'll get ahead of them. All right. Why do you want to do this? I mean, by the way, I think he answers the question of why you want to do it right there. Let's get ahead of the notification requirements. What do you think, Caleb?
That's right. I think that, as a company that truly cares about security, similar to how open source works, we want to ensure our security is also open to our customers and our users to get the mass, the eyeballs of the masses and wisdom of the crowd to alert and be open both to our regulators, our customers themselves. And not only do we get thousands and thousands of eyeballs giving us feedback and detecting early detects and attacks, we are also able to respond to those. And you guys are also transparent in seeing that. So you can see not only the events we have, but the alerts and responses that we have for them.
Oh, knocking it out of the park, Caleb. Very good. And by the way, Andrew Aiken echoes his bad idea, transparency for the win. Yes. All right. Edward, yes. Why do you want to do this? What are you going to add to this? Why do you want to do this?
Yeah, I think Caleb really covered it well. Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
We're going to do better. I'm going to let you have the first check. I'm getting you the first crack.
You could also say like it builds a great following of people.
Yeah.
You're going to build a huge. Everyone's going to subscribe. They're like, what? They're doing this? I got to see this.
All right. Okay, Edward, you're going to get first crack at this one. All right. This comes from Peter Gregory. Automate locking out accounts to slow down door knockers without first checking to make sure you aren't locking out a root or administrator. Why do you want to do this?
Yeah.
So you get an alert. It was like, let's just lock it before we do anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, one thing is one way to achieve perfect security is to, just turn down everything, right? Disconnect everybody's, laptops right. and computers. So a lot of times security is a balance between business operation and the, ultimate kind of security of the system. So I think this makes a lot of sense. If the environment is very security conscious, I'm sure there are a number of organizations on the planet where the policies dictate, such operations actually is preferred.
Oh, yeah! And I'm going to add to this. If you just let your staff know that you may be randomly locked out and you should have a backup plan when you're locked out, that's the other thing. All right. Caleb, what are you going to add to this?
Yeah, oh, man, this was a hard one. I would say that, one of our jobs is always to raise the cost for attackers. And by immediately locking the account for longer and intermediate periods of time, by this will raise the cost and frustration for the attacker, causing them to back away as fast as possible. So, yeah, and move on to something else.
We have to give that to you.
We've got a winner.
Caleb, you knocked it out of the park. Very good job. You pulled through though on the second one there, Edward. I appreciate it. All right. Let me remind everybody that we have just 15 minutes left in our discussion today, but we are going to have our meetup on Discord. If you're not on Discord already, get on Discord and get ready. That link at the bottom of the screen is going to change to our Discord where you can join us for open chat. We can break out into smaller rooms too. Oh, actually, let me use this time now. Let me ask right now. Type the word meetup : if you have any question you want to ask the community, and it can be anything, it can be on our topic today or anything else. We're going to reserve those, and we're going to, I'll just go through the questions, and each one, if you're looking for feedback from everybody else, maybe some job you're looking for, just some challenge you personally have, type it out. Meetup : we're going to save them, put it, and we're going to ask everybody those questions as we go through, and I'm interested to know what you think. All right. And remember, click the link at the bottom of the screen to register for our event that's happening in 2 weeks. All right, let's see what we got here for questions come in. This is a more general question, but let's not spend too much time on this one. This comes from Peter Canuck. And we run in different circles than generally, but what is your experience? Are companies truly doing automation, and do they understand the need for automation? I think generally they understand the need for automation. What percentage you're actually seeing doing it? You're nodding your head. Edward, want to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, I agree with you, David. In general, folks understand the need for automation, right? Automation, you can say, is a key part of the human evolution that we learned over times. That, if you keep doing something over and over again, it kind of doesn't make sense. And we are living where we are today with the automations from the centuries of our ancestors. I think our company automating is a more interesting question, to be frank, because if we look at the technology landscape right now, if you want to automate today, frankly, it's difficult. You need large investments because you need to hire people who know how to automate, which in general means they know how to script, and maybe in the worst case, actual software developers.
By the way, let me just pause you for a second on just that. Prior to the Gen AI explosion, the Poneman Report had put out research because AI had been sold to us as it's going to eliminate your staff, where it's proved the level of expertise that was needed was so sky high that you actually had to increase your staff if you wanted to do any kind of AI automation. Go on.
Yeah. So yes, you're absolutely right. So I would say at this moment, if we take a snapshot, probably the majority of security teams are not. They want to automate, but they are not able to automate due to the lack of resources, because the investment required to achieve significant automation is very high. We have one example we have heard from a team where they spent 4 years and 3 full-time developers and wrote like over 100 playbooks and fine-tuned a lot of detection enrichments in order to get to a place where they are comfortable with the alert volume that they have.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to add to this, Caleb? Go ahead.
100% of all companies want to automate. Well, 99%. I know there's a 1% of company that doesn't want to automate. But to Edward's point, just because you want to automate, actually automating is expensive. It takes time, it takes resources, it takes know-how in order to do so. And the goal of AI is it's supposed to reduce that cost, right? And its non-determinism is both its weakness and its strength, right? Where, hey, if I want the problem with automation is it's extraordinarily fixed and very brittle, and AI can help get an understanding of that, be a little bit more flexible in automation, and really bring down that cost of automation. But that's the goal, like that's the theory of where this thing goes. But I think that is something that every company now, when you start thinking about 99% want to, how many are actually doing it? And so I do think AI opens that up to even small businesses having some opportunity to maybe automate the things they do, assuming AI gets to the level of where that can be used by them. And so that's some of the hope, I think.
By the way, just quickly note that we have a couple of meetup questions, like what would be your requirements for a CISO, and also who would hire Andrew Aiken? Andrew's looking for a job, so we'll chat with Andrew what he's looking for. How's that working out? I want to bring up something James Sparenberg put in for a 10% tip, and I think I'd like to know how we're achieving this. I think it's more my question. I think this sounds like a good thing to do, but I don't know if we're achieving it. And maybe you have this as a model within DropZone AI. By the way, let me speak about that. If you have not clicked on the little bar chart, poll to get a warm handoff to the nice people over at DropZone. Warm, nice people. I'm talking to him right now. His name is Edward. If you can like a nice warm handoff to him, go ahead and click on the bar chart right there. But I want to bring up this 10% thing that James Sparenberg brought up. Shorten the feedback loop for training AI so that if it hallucinates, which is inevitable, it can also learn that it's hallucinates wrong and doesn't do it again. My question is, how are you speeding up that feedback loop, Edward?
Yeah, there's kind of a couple of things. I would say in general, there's probably like two types of feedback loop we're thinking about. One is oftentimes referred to as introspection. It's a very common technique used by a number of AI agent developers, where you essentially have one model that's generating whatever response you want, and then you have an independent model that essentially introspect or review the output of the first model. And then if the second model feels like it's not good enough, or it doesn't make sense, it will send that signal to the first model and have the first model try again, incorporating that input. It's kind of mimics our human behavior. When we are saying things or writing things, we often self-correct, right? Mm-hmm. Subconsciously. So that's one feedback loop. The other feedback loop that's very common is a more, I would say, a human in the loop feedback loop, where the investigation or whatever generation might be wrong, and then as like the system can monitor the human users input, and then leverage that as a feedback signal. One example, and we actually also again see this with for example, human security analysts, right? A new hire might look at a mass MFA reset from a specific user and decide to escalate it because it looks very scary. Why is this user resetting 50 people's MFAs? That looks very strange. But then a senior analyst might come in and say, hey, hold on a second, this guy is the director of IT and he has a script that runs every now and then to reset people's MFAs for a variety of different reasons. It's an approved policy. So as a human analyst, we learn from these feedback, and there are ways to implement similar feedback loops within an AI system as well.
Very good. All right, let me do this. Let me remind everybody, click the link at the bottom of the screen. Do it right now because that sucker's going to change in just a minute or two. Please register for the next one. I'm going to come back and get final comments from both of you. But first, I'm going to do a couple quick wrap-up things for our event, and we will be having our meetup portion as well. So I want to say a huge thanks to our sponsor, DropZone AI. Thank you very much for sponsoring this event. They've been a phenomenal sponsor of the CISO series. Thank you so much. And you should check them out at dropzone.ai. Remember, click on the little bar chart on the right if you would like a warm handoff to Edward. Second, starting soon at 3:30 p.m., 12:30 p.m., so that is almost 90 minutes from now, or a little more than 90 minutes, we have Adam Ariano, who's the former VP Enterprise Cybersecurity over at PayPal. When we booked him, he was the VP, but now he is the former. So we were saying former as well. That is always good. That happens on our YouTube channel. So just go to youtube.com/CISO series. You'll find it. Or just go to our site. You'll find it on the events page or click the YouTube button. You'll find it eventually. Stick around for our meetup. So this is just kind of a screenshot of what it's going to look like. If you look on the sort of the lower left, if you haven't used Discord so much, sort of managing your audio and video is not always so straightforward. It's at the very bottom in the left corner, but we will, that link, it's changed right now. Thank you so much, Aaron. If you click that link, that'll bring open. Please tell me no one's having a problem with that link right now, because we had a problem last week with the link. Hopefully there's no problem with. If there is, we can change it and make it work. If you want to sponsor Super Cyber Friday, email us at info@csoseries.com. Remember to register for the one that's happening in 2 weeks as well. And that is it. So we have exactly 5 minutes left. So more than enough time to get final comments. Oh, why did you do that? Did me as a 4-panel than rather a 3-panel. Now we're a 3-panel. Wonderful. All right. There we go. Crowdcast hacking code. Right there you go. So also the link has been put there by the CISO series producer. All right. I'm going to start with you, Caleb. What is the topic about hacking SOC automation that we have not addressed, that we should have addressed?
I mean, maybe when we start thinking about, struggle around detection itself, like we've talked a lot about responding to detections, but actually doing detections might be an interesting topic around how is AI going to help in that level of automation.
Mm-hmm. And Edward, I'm going to ask the same question of you. What have we not talked about that we should have talked about? And we can talk about it right now because we got 4 minutes.
Yeah. From my perspective, I think one thing we haven't really touched on is, what is the boundaries, or the upper limit of the automation, right?
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I think I was going to address this, but let's talk about it. All right, let's skip to it right now. Well, let's talk about what's next stage, because you're trying to be comfortable with tier 1. What do you think our next comfortable stage is going to be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say part of it depends on how smart the models will get to, but I do think in general what's probably very realistic coming down very soon is actually other tier 1 work within the broader security operations, such as tier 1 vulnerability management, tier 1 threat intelligence analysis, tier 1 code reviews or security code reviews. The other kind of tier 1 work within the broader security operation domain.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you the same question, Caleb. What do you think is the next stage? I mean, again, I stressed you how much you've studied on this process. What sort of gives you hope for what the next stage is going to be?
I actually I gave a presentation at B-Sides this year around where I think AI is going to make its biggest impact. And, it's not about a specific function or a product that I think AI is going to add its value. I think it's going to add its value in what I called sort of these 3 C's, which is it's going to be able to enable existing products today with context. Because one of the biggest things that we miss in products like vulnerability management or even detections and responding to detections is, well, I need to know context of my environment and where am I and what servers and, who is owning things. And I think AI is going to bring a lot to context and enable these products to have context, which I think is going to be a big uplift to how these things are accurate. Number 2, I think that they're going to be very good at coverage. AI can help coverage a lot. So when you think about today when we think about, where we do detection and response, where do we detect things is a great example. Like, do you have, things that look at every single S3 bucket right? Well, no, because that's really expensive, or like storage of these logs is really expensive. Maybe if you had a local model that can actually analyze it there, it becomes, you get the same results, but it's much, much cheaper. And so, I think coverage is a big one. And finally, third, I think communication. One of the biggest challenges you have in operations teams is consolidating or pulling information together from various different products, security products, as an example. Like, let's say your CISO asks for something really simple. What is the risk of this environment or this asset? Like, if you really want to get that answer, you have to go to 15 different products, export reports out of them, shove them all together, and then manually write the report so your CISO can understand it. That's a huge waste of time for anybody. And so I think that AI can be very good at automatically pulling data out of these reports, synthesizing it, making it sense, and making it presentable for whoever it needs to be. So I think those are the three.
Excellent. Thank you very much for summarizing that. And guess what? We're now at the end of the show. So I want to thank our guests, Edward Wu from Dropzone AI, from White Rabbit, Caleb Sima. Please, everybody, click on the bottom of the screen. Join us over at the Discord right now. We're going to be over there. We're going to be chatting about this topic, anything else you'd like to discuss. We can break out into rooms as well. And by the way, yes, Caleb's phone behind him actually works, a payphone. You actually put coins in it, and it will work. So go over to his house and make a call from his payphone. All right. And by the way, it's clean, unlike the ones that I've seen outside. His is clean. Was it clean when you got it, by the way, Caleb, or did you have to really clean the thing up?
Yeah. No, it's an extraordinarily good condition. I had to gut it and then replace it with the circuit boards and things that I needed. But yeah, that's the way it came. It's very good condition.
Very good. All right. Thank you very much. And thank you to our producers, to Aaron, to Rich, to Andrew. Aaron, you can take us out. Bye, everybody. Click the button on the bottom of the screen.